All right. Well, good morning, all. It is, what day is it today? It's May 18th, our Monday Zoom laboratory worship time together. Glad you all are here. Excited to have you. We're post one of the kind of meltdown Zoom times that happened on Sunday. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But I want to welcome anybody that is new with us for the first time. I'm glad you all are here. Folks are still rolling in. Again, this is recorded, so anything you say here will be posted on the internet for the world to see, and I'll usually get that up probably by tomorrow morning. As we do, I kind of walk through just to kind of prime the pump for our conversations, what we did on Sunday, some of our learnings, and then we'll open it up for questions. We'll talk a little bit about what happened this past Sunday. I'd like to talk a little bit about folks' reactions, what you've seen. I think it's brought out some interesting conversations around technology and platforms. So we'll talk a little bit about that as well. All right. So again, welcome. So as we do at our service at First Presbyterian Church in Palo Alto, we gather everybody together at 9:30, and now we have about 14 people who are part of the leadership of our worship service. From our tech deacons, we have now greeters. We have 2 greeters that just kind of live in the chat room. We have our offering person, a special music person, and a couple of our staff on there. So we run through, do our sound checks at about 9:50-ish. We take a 5-minute break at 9:55. Somebody, our guest musician or our music person starts a prelude, and then this is the slide that folks see at 9:55. We let everybody in. We have about, I've named all 14 of our folks co-hosts. So they're kind of scanning the room just to make sure we think we know as many people as we can. We don't try to, we go from, 80 to 100 people logged in, so we can't verify everybody right off. So folks are pretty diligent at just making sure folks that they're not acting up, or that we at least know their names. We then we go in. I do welcome announcements. Again, we are beginning to have more conversations about shifting to being non-geographic. So we're starting to really think about how we speak about who we are and what we do. We are kind of Northern California centric, but really kind of starting to broaden out to folks who have been coming who are not living in the area and never will. Talk about our weekly gatherings. We're dropping one, adding a couple of them, which are going to happen in June. Then we do some announcements. We're starting to bring folks in to do these announcements. Before I would just run through them, but we're going to have the leaders of the group start to do the announcements. So we have a couple of things. I will tell you, if you want to join us for our webinar this Friday, I'm talking with Jack Jenkins, who's Presbyterian, who just wrote a new book. And then next Friday, very excited, we're bringing in Liz Theo Harris, I'm going to do a webinar with her and talk about the Poor People's Campaign and the march on the 20th. So Jack's registration link is out. We're saving, but not sending out the registration link publicly until our folks can sign up for Liz's this week, but that'll be on the 29th. If you don't know Liz Theo Harris, she's a PCUSA pastor and also the co-chair of the Poor People's Campaign with Reverend Dr. William Barber. All right, and then we're doing coffee hour breakouts. I walked through again our Zoom, kind of just thinking, so for new people especially, and then just walk people through our service. We don't do a bulletin or anything like that. So I just walk them through quickly what we're going to do. I do a centering chime for 3 minutes, which is excruciating for me and for anybody else who are extroverts and don't like silence, but we do it anyway. Opening prayer, I rotate that between our parish associates, and we sing a hymn. We have been getting, as people are getting more and more comfortable with the service, we're starting to hear more and more grumblings about the music and and we've kind of maxed out our great sound with music that's not pre-recorded, so we're now running into some of that with folks. But I think that's a natural and an okay thing. We do our confession. So I play one. We have a liturgist who does the many, and then we pass the peace. And so that's our piece for our passing peace stuff. And then we switch to gallery view, and I reveal, and everybody kind of comes out and says hello and all that kind of stuff. We come back, we do our reading, and then I give everybody a chat room question that they're invited. We have I would say about 80% of our folks love the chat room piece. We have a loud group of about 10 to 15, maybe 20, who feel like it's really distracting while they're trying to listen. But we're staying with the chat room question because I just think folks can handle both. So we have that goes on, and then this is funny. The site I use to get all my images, my free images, is called Pexels. Pexels. If you have not used them, it's great. And I looked up church pews, and this is one of them. So if somebody took a picture of our Presbyterians, you'll recognize that hymnal. Anyway, so then I do notice I keep the chat room question there all the time because I'm encouraging people to talk during worship. And then we do a little bit of my sermon time. All right. So do a prayer. We sing. We have, so I explain our offering person, who that's going to be. And we've been using people from our local partners as well as kind of national organizations. So it's a great opportunity if you're bringing people in, even to pre-record, to have them come in and share a little about what they're doing. During all of this in our chat room, they're posting links to the organization, to our offering. So you're passing the plate is pretty much gone now, and will be for in perpetuity, which is lovely. We do special music. I talk about special music, and then I talk about the prayers of the people. So I go through these, and then we flip into seeing everybody after the reveal. We go. I take them back to everybody viewing, and then I come back at as I'm closing out the prayers of the people. And this is new. I don't like to flip back and forth too much, but we decided to try it because we hadn't said the Lord's Prayer together in a while. Because, like many of you, a big believer that if you're going to say something that ever expect to be memorized, you should have it printed somewhere. So we flip back and we do the Lord's Prayer. And then we go back to reveal and then zoom to the end with a communion charge of benediction. La, 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 la. All right. There we go. I'm going to go to, so any immediate questions, thoughts? If you're new, you have priority to talk to at any of these times. I mean, we've developed some great interactions and people have gotten to know each other. But if you're new, make sure that you go ahead and jump in with any questions that you have. Kind of the rules are this. There are no questions that are too simple. You can either ask them out loud and folks will answer you. We can respond here on our video, or use your chat room and just ask questions in there. Folks here are so responsive to people. And I think the best part about everything that's been going on around the Zoom stuff here and on our Facebook group is that how helpful folks are. I've just felt it's been really a good model for how to be collegial and encouraging for people. So thank you all for being part of that here as well. The other thing is we ask you, even if you've been here multiple times and you've spoken on more than one occasion, if you would just make sure you say your name and your ministry context so that we kind of know where you are. It's helpful as folks are translating for their particular location. So let me just open it up for questions. If there's any thoughts, questions, let's talk a little bit about, it could be specific about what I just presented. Some of you have seen that over and over again. Or it can be anything in general if you're new and you just had a dying question, or if you want to share any thoughts about what happened on Sunday. So I will start with that piece. Thank you for those of you that got hit. It sucks. But for those of us on the West Coast, you gave us a warning and a heads up. So I was up at about 7 my time and just kind of flipping through my phone, and all of a sudden you see all this like, whoa! Like I could just see like people at their computers melting. So I was able by 8 o'clock to send out a mass email that said, just a heads up, if you're not in by 10:20, I'm canceled. Service is not happening. And there'll be something recorded on YouTube posted later in the day. So, and then I think by the time it got all the way to the West Coast church start time, it had got fixed. I haven't heard of many West Coast people that got hit. But I'm sure some did, but it worked out fine for us. So I'm sorry those of you on the East and in the UK had to go through this, but your suffering helped us, if that makes it feel any better. So thank you all. So thoughts, questions, go for it. And if you would use your raise hand piece in the participants thing, that makes it a little bit easier. We're heading to a couple of screens now. So if you have any questions, use the raise hand piece down at the bottom there. Any questions, thoughts? All right, who got hit and how did you handle it? Mark Koenig, you are up.
Thanks, Bruce. Mark Koenig in the Presbyterian of New York City. Just want to let you know there are a couple of questions in the chat. Don't know if you're monitoring that.
I am not. So if there are, here, we'll just look in here.
That's all I wanted to say.
Oh, okay. Thank you. All right. Oh, okay. So there's two quick ones I can answer. John Bassinger, there are no stupid questions. Well, I'm sure there are, but this is not one of them. What kind of screen share were you just using? PowerPoint, something else? Just jumped on a meeting. So I use Google Slides. I think Google Slides, because it's so collaborative, we have multiple staff that work on our presentations. And now that I'm on, some of you were in earlier, I've been running all of our presentations, all of our worship services on a Chromebook, which I love. I'm a diehard Chromebook since the beginning. We've had them for 10 years since they came out. But it leaves a lot wanting for Zoom. So we were able to do it. But I'm on a Mac now. Just got it and ran it for the first time this Sunday. Many of my Mac friends are gloating like who knows what, which only reinforces my cultish aversion to Mac. But I will say it has been lovely to use. So I just flipping windows back and forth between the Zoom and the presentation, and I share the presentation. But I really love Google Slides once you get a look and feel that you want. I also have super high control needs about look and design. So it gets done on Monday. So today, our office person sets up the service for this coming up Sunday. Everybody else puts their content in by Wednesday, and then I have Thursday and Friday to make it look like I want it to look. At some point, I have to give that up, but not yet. So, so that's I use Google Slides, and then Beth, you had asked a question about transitioning to a non-geographic church. So I shared in the Facebook group a document that our session is using, our 5 questions that we've been struggling with or thinking through over the last month. What have we learned about ourselves? What have we lost? What have we gained? How has COVID-19 impacted, or how is it going to affect our congregational life for the long-term future? And then what possibilities is God laying out before us? What are the things that are ahead of us? And what we've discovered, like many of you, is we think it's a huge, surprising blessing that we've connected with so many people who are not in our geography and who will never be in our geography. Maybe they once were, but they'll never be again. And that folks are so transient now, especially some of our younger people, that they've been joining us from college. They've been joining us where they're sheltered in place in their first right after college, whatever it is. And we have about 5 or 6 people who have found us, who we will never meet in person unless they come here and have been engaging in some of our discussions. So we are thinking about just saying and claiming we are now going to shift our lens to build to a community that is no longer geographically bound. There are going to be lots of questions about this. It is going to make people mad, but it kind of, I was a church planter. I mean, I kind of consider myself that, but for about 15 years. And the critique was always, you're going to take my people from other churches, right? Whether or not we were going for the same folks or not, that was always, and that's going to happen now. That will happen again, right? As soon as we have somebody who wants to join us from another state, I think there's going to be this sense of, why are they joining a church out in Palo Alto, which they're not really. They're joining a church that's now broad, versus shouldn't they be in a church locally? I think that's a struggle. That's going to be a question, but we are meeting on Wednesday to make kind of those decisions that we're going to head in that direction. So we're just going to embrace it and kind of see where we go. I mean, I think we are a unique theological space. We are transitioning into a unique cultural space, and so we don't believe that everybody is going to like what we do. So it's not like we're going to try to meet everybody's needs, but so that's kind of how we're handling it. And we'll transition to that, meaning that we're basically going to have a lens of in person and we're usually going to use Zoom. But what does that look like when we do everything, keeping in mind that people are coming from all over the place? So that's kind of where we're headed with that. I'm really excited about it. I think there's some huge potential for us all in that regard. So one of the questions is, would deacon and elders be local? I actually see that now what happens. So our first member that doesn't live here, and then how do we ordain elders and deacons that don't live here? I mean, if we're going to do it, if we see people who are not geographically located with us as full members, then they're full members. You can't have like sub members unless you decide to do that, right? You're kind of you're an affiliate member, which I don't think we have in our denomination anymore. I don't know. So we're just gonna kind of say, if you're a member, you're a member, and cross those bridges around deacons and elders as we come along. So good. All right. So let me go back up here. Leslie Ann, you have a question, thought, comment? You are unmuted.
Yeah, not a question, but so when I went to go on, we discovered that lots of people couldn't get on. I went onto this site, the Zoom Faith site, and discovered that this was going on in the United Kingdom. So it was a worldwide problem.
Yeah.
And it resolved. Well, anyway, so what we discovered is a lot of people could get on and hear the audio, but they couldn't see. So we just went on and had our worship service as if it were just entirely audio. Fortunately, the worship leaders all had a printed bulletin.
Oh, yeah.
And so we were able to go on that way. The situation was resolved by 1:00 because our deacons were able to meet just fine.
Yeah, we had an 8:30. We have an 8:30 service here, and they went fine too. So I think what we've heard now is that it only attacks certain servers for Zoom, but then most of them were by the time the West Coast started waking up. I will say, I know we would like to think that the church broke Zoom. I just don't think that happened. I mean, I think during the rest of the week, there are just as many people using Zoom from businesses that, I mean, there was one time on Twitter, somebody said, the church broke Twitter. And I'm like, oh, that's sweet. We're not that huge across the board. But anyway, but it's kind of nice to think that maybe we made them notice, because Zoom has not noticed churches. And I think that there may be something that maybe this will spark some conversations around religious communities. Anyway, thank you, Leslie. And I'm glad you got something to work. All right, Elizabeth, you are unmuted.
Thanks. Good morning, everyone. I'm glad to see everyone. I'm in Elizabeth Kirkpatrick, Columbus, Indiana. We had a cacophony of Zoom problems. We had some that could see but not hear. Others that could hear but not see.
It sounds like scripture.
Yeah, it was. It was. What was interesting, though, in the mix of as we were doing it, you could see the congregation that were very frustrated that they couldn't see one another. They were very upset that all they saw were themselves. So we tried a variety of things, and we finally thought, okay, we'll kick me out. Let me try to restart the whole meeting. Well, that proceeded that I was in a meeting by myself with all of them supposedly in another group. And in the end, it was just done. We did not know it was at that time, we didn't know it was an international thing going. I figured it was my butterfingers that I had done something wrong. So you're in that frustration mode, and I'm on the phone to my my more technological members. The blessing for us is we had already scheduled yesterday a car parade to go visit all the homebound, and so people, I think we had more come out to that because no one could connect in the morning.
Right.
But we basically by 10 o'clock we had scrapped it, and I sent an email out to everyone saying, I'm sorry, I don't know what's up. And so I am very grateful to see all of you. I can see your faces, I can hear you, I can see the chat working. So it gives me confidence for the rest of this week, because yesterday was just an exercise in futility.
Oh, well, so let me ask, can I ask a couple questions? I think this
Yeah.
is helpful. So how did, how do you feel like you responded internally? What was your anxiety panic level? And then how did your folks respond to this? Because are they still filled with grace and like we're all kind of, I mean, what was the response?
My folks I was filled with heightened anxiety. So let's leave it at that. I was over the top. I had folks sending me texts, thank you for trying, we appreciate it. Another member wrote in saying, well, God just wants us to have silent meditative reflection today. Enjoy, folks. Another one sent a link to one of our Presbytery exec sermons for a Presbytery meeting we had this week. So they were beyond filled with grace. But I think in our community, we've been allowed to go back to worship, but our church has chosen not to in place. And there was no comment for anyone that said, well, we should have been in place this Sunday. And that I was grateful to hear, because we have decided until we can get the technology to have both online and in our sanctuary, we're not going back, so that so no one is excluded. So the members were grateful. They've been thrilled because we've done Zoom from the beginning of this COVID. They've been able to see one another, so that you could just tell that they couldn't see each other. They don't want to have just a recorded sermon of me speaking or someone else. So, I mean, it was powerful. For me, I'm just like, what did I do? And that was, and I kept going, and we couldn't figure out, was it wait? Because some people were saying it was the waiting room function. Some were, and 28 cooks, 30 cooks trying to figure out Zoom, and none of us are proficient in Zoom, just made it fun. So.
All right. Well, that's good to hear, because I know that we saw a lot of anxiety, and I was wondering around folks kind of, I think those who are a little bit had some misgivings about Zoom anyway, and maybe have gone through some other things. This was just the last straw, and now we're scrapping it all and going on. And that I think I've seen from pastoral leadership as well, as I'm sure some members. But I'm glad that, in the midst of everything, they were able to handle that well. So thank you, Elizabeth. All right. Susanna Porter, you are unmuted and ready to go. Go ahead.
Hi, so I'm Susanna. I'm from Baltimore. I'm a parish admin for an ELCA church, and I'm on the Delaware, Maryland Synod Council.
Welcome.
And it's been a long couple months of teaching people technology. But I'm grateful, because I think people are starting to hear me now when I say this is what disabled folks and queer folks have been saying for a long time. Yeah. Online church is real church, and that it's needed, and that it should be a main part of church as opposed to just like some sort of side ministry. So like yesterday, thank God for this group and the reports about the UK, because that let me start putting my backup options in place, which I have a couple backup options. Usually the backup option is OBS and scraping my desktop, but that's not going to work when Zoom's already being kind of a butthead. So I real quick switched to Google Meet, which nobody was familiar with. And but the benefit for me was that we live stream to both Facebook and YouTube through a service called Caster, which is like Restreamio, only it's like it's way cheaper. So it costs us like $10 a month to restream through Caster. So I didn't usually Zoom sends the feed to Caster, and then Caster sends it to Facebook and YouTube. So I could just scrape Google Meet and send that to Caster instead. And being able to quickly send a different video conferencing platform to Caster was really useful in a last second situation. But the thing that I wanted, and my members were super thrilled. They were just happy to see people. They're not all in the call because they're getting live streamed, but they are all in the chat. And I have a lot of people over 60, a lot of people over 80 that have learned YouTube chat and learned Facebook because they're just so excited to like talk to people.
Yep. Your internet's a little
But
is cracking up a little, Susanna.
the other thing I wanted to pop back in there is that, like, at least for the ELCA, like our constitutions.
Oh, we're losing you, Susanna. We've lost you. We'll hopefully we'll try to grab you on again later. All right. Michelle Ward, you are up. Go for it.
All right. Hello, everyone. I also wanted to chime in about Google Meet being our Plan B backup.
Where are you?
And I am in Baltimore, Maryland.
Oh,
I am at Brown Memorial in Bolton Hill in Baltimore City. And the Google Meet shift was pretty seamless, but we figured out how to stream Google on our YouTube channel.
Uh-huh.
And then we're able to get everyone on, but we lost about 40 participants who,
Sure.
Some of our older folks who couldn't make the shift over from Zoom to YouTube, even though we tried coaching them through it on Zoom.
And did you, so you were doing that live, so people could hear you, but just couldn't see or whatever was going on. So you were coaching them on Zoom. Here's the new link to get to Google Meets.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. We were giving them the link to our YouTube channel for worship.
Okay.
Because we knew that it would just be easier to get everyone at least on one platform watching everything. And then I was the tech pastor who monitored the chat on YouTube Live for prayer requests and stuff like that. And then we had to scrap a few things last minute, but it ended up being okay.
Right.
But it was definitely, we did a communication blitz where we put it on our Facebook page last minute. We sent out an email to the entire congregation.
Okay. So you were preempted. Yeah. You knew that it was coming, so you'd already been hearing, and then okay, great.
We knew about it an hour before worship was about to start, so we tried troubleshooting for an hour, and it was just so inconsistent that we decided just to scrap it and move to Google Meet and YouTube Live instead. But we found that some people, even though YouTube Live is easier to use, some of our older folks got really anxious about a new platform.
Yeah. And
just didn't even switch over to the link, even though we had given them, we communicated where the link was 5 different ways. They were just like, this is too much. I just not even gonna try. But
yeah, I can see that. I mean, there's going to be technological platform overload.
Mm-hmm.
So you're just going to have everybody get onto Slack now and start one more thing. Yes.
That's right. If anyone does do the switch over like we did, we learned the hard way that there's a 10-second delay between the Google Meet audio and the YouTube Live streaming platform. So I had to make sure to mute myself on YouTube Live while I was recording audio, while the audio was going through Google Meet, or else it sounded like I was speaking in the round over myself. So the call to worship was like me repeating over and over again.
Well, that would solve people's wanting creative musical things to happen. You could do a round with yourself. And folks like, that's so creative. What's that technology?
Right.
Great. Well, thank you for sharing that. I know there's been a lot of folks like, again, what are some other options? And I think the thing I think that is illustrated there is we can model agility even in the midst of anxiety. Like, how do we yes, this sucks and who knows what's going to happen, but let's just take a breath and try something. And so I'm glad it sounds like there's still some grace left out there for us.
There is. Yeah, good. For sure.
Good. Well, thank you.
Hey, Bruce.
Yep.
I would
go
love
for it,
to
Andy. Yeah, go for it, Andrew.
Yesterday, so I'm not going to go into the drama because I think that's probably already been covered, but yesterday was my first Sunday having someone else that I had helped trained up to be the lead. And so I, slept in a little and decided to just check in about an hour out to see how things were going, and found my phone with, God knows how many missed calls and text messages. And I just felt horrible. I felt horrible. There's nothing that I could have done or could have done differently. But the noticing that I had was the inability to pivot to just make it simple. Like, so yes, we went through this tech check and we had this, elaborate plan, but I finally had to just stop offering suggestions, because my suggestions were, who cares about the plan? We know we can Facebook Live with one pastor who can just do a welcoming prayer, can do the reading of the scripture, they can do their sermon still. And in the end, people just want that interaction. And there was just not the capacity or willingness to walk away from what the plan was. And so the choice to just cancel it all and redirect folks to videos or other folks out there that were doing their services still was, I couldn't fight it. And I finally just gave up, because I was like, you know what, I'm not going to fight this. But it's interesting. Like, when I think back to 2 months ago, we had such a simple, really glorified prayer service. And that's all worship was. And it was good enough, because it is good enough to just gather and to be in prayer with one another. And it had no bells and whistles. It had no visuals. It had no audio. We had no music, and nobody cared. And it's interesting. My response, my reaction to yesterday is, we've now set this new bar as to what is supposedly the baseline of what we're willing to do. And if we can't do that, we're canceling. It's too much. And I'm trying to have grace towards our pastors, towards our musician, others who were in that panic for a good 30 minutes before I started chiming in. But it's just interesting, and I'm still trying to figure out how to debrief that in a way that's supportive and not judgmental. Because, but to me, what I started with sharing with you all is what I'll say is that, just 6 to 8 weeks ago, what I encouraged us to do yesterday is all we were doing. And I think we need to be okay with Plan B being a stripped down version, which in the end is still a gathering of community. And can't that be enough? And I don't know. That was an interesting moment that I was not expecting. I thought that my suggestion would have been received as, oh my gosh, that's genius. Forget about the slides. Let's just go back to doing what we did 2 months ago.
I wish more of my suggestions were received as, oh my gosh, that's genius, but it just
no. It was just an immediate but we can't. Does that mean we can't do the slides during the sermon? And I'm like, no, we can't do any of that. Who cares? Nobody cares. But I had to let it go.
Right. Thank you. So there's two things that God's either saying to you, Andrew, is never take another day off because you broke Zoom. That could be one option. Or just you got to go away, man, and just turn your phone off and tell people, no, really, I'm not here. Oh my gosh. I'm just imagining you no, I can't. I love you, Andrew. You're amazing. I'm going to call on you, Beth, in a minute. I think there is something about where we've transitioned into our worship experience and expectations now. I've been having some conversations with some of our folks around, are we just trying to replicate what was a decent service that we used to do on Sunday? Or are we building out something new that takes advantage of the platform, and what do we let go of of what we used to do in order to really have a new expression? And I think that's where, and I'm not sure everybody realizes that I don't think we should be just trying to replicate exactly what we did in person and just plop it online. But how do we use the platform and the things that it offers in order to build community in new ways? And that's a shift that I think came up to this past Sunday, right? This what are we really trying to do? I know some people, Joanna shared earlier, that they just went to a Facebook Live, their pastor just preached, and then that was it. So I think what I think this does help is for everybody to come have a backup plan. Here's what we're going to do if Zoom goes down or whatever. This is kind of what we're going to do. All right, I'm going to call Beth Wyman. Go for it. Oh,
yeah, this is Beth, and I'm in Boston.
Okay.
So front end of this continent's problems. And we just said, Andrew, we're going back to and revisiting what we did at the beginning. Let's go revisit. And people were fine with that. And we couldn't host. It didn't let us host at all. So we had to instruct people about muting and unmuting, and it was fine. Some people got frustrated when we were trying to work it all out and left, but most people hung in. And I think the nice thing was we kind of realized we have evolved and changed and learned some things, and that was nice for people.
Oh, good. Good.
That
Thank you. All right, Brenda, you're up. Go for it.
Hi, I'm an intentional interim UCC pastor, primarily in the Chicago area, and I'm working with a very small older congregation south of Chicago. In my church, I have one couple who is under the age of 60. I am the tech expert, and I was on Zoom for the first time 2 months ago. So our support level is very short. What I'm looking for right now is some help facilitating pastoral care and visioning around what happens next. My congregation has always contended that screens have no place in worship, and they continue to say that. They like Zoom because they can see each other. And so that is the primary feature that we use. They are itching to get back in worship. We don't have usually more than 20 people in worship. It's going to be tough for us to say, but our limit has to be 10 as soon as that is allowed, to try and figure out how we actually could socially distance 20 people in our sanctuary. We couldn't sing, and persuading people that they can't sing is going to be a major challenge. We have had a total in the past 2 months of 3 people from outside of our congregation who have been part of Zoom. Probably half of my congregation is not on email, let alone other sources.
Yeah.
But Zoom has worked well for us because they can call in.
Yeah.
And so half of my congregation calls in by phone every week. I'm just looking for ways that I can encourage them to flex their Zoom muscles and their tech muscles just a tiny bit more, in the interest of being a congregation who can be at least a tiny bit relevant going forward.
Thank you, Brenda, for that. I know that there are many churches that are kind of in that setting. So I would point you to a couple places where your colleagues will be of great help. One is so last week I posted the recording, and some of you have asked me where the document is that I shared. I posted the recording of this meeting last week in the Zoom Faith Facebook group. And in the comments, I left a link to a document that we're using.
I've seen the document.
Okay, so right.
Yeah, so I'm going to need help implementing that document.
So part of it is only for the congregation, I think, has to start having, the conversation is not how do we turn into a non-geographic parish or anything. That's not where we start, right? It's planting the seeds for who are we as a community. And that, because not every church is going to have the capacity, the will, the ability to make this grand shift to multi-platforms but it does tweak our understanding of who is community and what do we do. So I think starting to walk people through those conversations early is really good. The other thing that I've found really helpful is I know that there's a post on my page. I just asked folks what they're doing now that shelter in place is starting to be lifted. Some really heartfelt, interesting comments about how people are stepping into that space in places, especially where maybe the pastor doesn't want to go back, but the state has said you can come back, or they have members that are itching to come back and others that are not. And that is forcing some really important questions for community to deal with. So that, and we're fortunately in California, that's not an issue for us, and we won't be given permission to come back for a while. Our governor has just been sued by a bunch of like a religious coalition to open up again. We are not part of that class action. Shocking, I know. But I would say look in there, because there are a lot of folks there kind of in your similar place where their congregation are pushing to come back. And so I think today people have posted how it went. Because there's all these, like, you're registering ahead of time, multiple services. So you're basically, some of them are making reservations to come to church so that you have your spaces. It just feels exhausting to me. But for those of you in states that are having to do this, that might be helpful. All right. Anybody else want to respond to Brenda? I think this is a really helpful one. Thank you, Brenda, for raising some of these questions. Does anybody have you can just unmute yourself and chime in if you have any response for Brenda.
I'd be glad to talk to you about it sometime.
Oh, yeah.
If you want to connect. Just FYI, it's a very similar situation.
Yes. Yeah, that would be a good connection. Thank you, MB. Yeah, connect and go ahead and private chat and exchange information. That Brenda, I would encourage you to talk with MB. All right. So Colette, it's on my. I'm not flexing my Facebook stat, so it's on my Facebook page. So look up Reyes-Chow page, and then I have my personal one. So those sounds so. So on my personal page on Facebook, if you're friends with me, that's where you get like my kids and cooking and animals. And then over on my page is where you get all the politics and links and everybody acting not always the best, that kind of stuff. So on my page, I put something that last week about now that shelter in place is ending. And I think there are like 60 or 70 people who have shared kind of their thoughts about it. So well worth looking at. All right. Okay. All right. Other question. Susanna, go for it. I think. Yep.
Well, can you hear me? Is this a better connection?
Yep.
I
Go
moved
for
over
it.
to my computer.
Oh,
Sorry.
good. Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah, finish off your story.
Okay, so like it actually comes back around to what you were talking about here. So like, just to answer the question you were just saying about, hey, how do we deal with the fact when the pastor doesn't want to come back yet because, you know, they don't want to get anyone sick, but then there's members of the congregation that are all, hey, I want to come back. We found it really useful to have nurses and social workers and people who have actual expertise be on a committee of reopening on our council. So we created this council on like a council committee on reopening so that they would make recommendations to the council, and then we put on there nurses and actual medical professionals because church are not epidemic virologists and we need to stop pretending like we are. So there's that. And how that's related to what we were talking about before is that I have a strong passion about, like, no offense to all you pastors, but I have a strong passion for fighting anti-clericalism. And, you know, and I really feel that this question about how do we make this decision to go back shouldn't necessarily just be made by pastors. Like, this is you know, at least I come from a Lutheran tradition. You know, we put the protest in Protestantism, and like, so the laity matters, and having the laity be part of that decision, especially there's a lot of expertise in our churches, and after 2,000 years, we have given them the impression that unless you have a theology degree, you can't be part of these conversations about when you go back and what's really good for us and on a medical sense, and that also goes back to how do you deal with members that are not local anymore? The idea that, hey, you know, like, that's taking stuff from other churches is a very like clerical idea. From those of us here in the laity, I am not a rostered leader. I'm just the tech person that y'all are needing to make this work, and the laity just wants to find a church that feeds you, that feeds you. That's what we need, a church that feeds us. And if our local ones aren't feeding us, then God will send us to a church that will. And finding a church that's not local, that feeds us, is God doing God's job. So I'm concerned about a lot of things you're concerned, because the ELCA has in its model constitution, which is the parts of the constitution that we're all required to adopt in our local constitutions, that you have to take communion and also give, but the communion is key because we haven't agreed that online communion is communion in order to be considered a member, which of course has voting privileges, of a church. So how we navigate that isn't just going to be a local level now, it's going to be a synod level and a church-wide level, because we have to really reassess what it means to be a member, because it's ingrained in, like, the local concept is ingrained in our denomination on a church-wide level.
Yep.
And I'm like concerned about that. So that's all the things, and I'm sorry that I cut out before.
That's all right.
Done.
Thank you. Thank you. No, I think you're getting a lot of echoing. I mean, I think every tradition will have to navigate this differently depending on their polity. For Presbyterians, I mean, sometimes the pastors, we do want to make the decisions, but our session are ultimately the ones that have to. So that is one difference. But I think the non-geographic piece, even for the most flexible pastors, is going to be difficult. When I think that piece is always going to be hard. But thank you for sharing that too. I obviously agree with you. So thank you. All right. I see Kristen, if you would go ahead, go for it.
I am in New York City, and the idea of reopening here is still so far in the distance. Of course, in the personal situation, on Saturday we had a security meeting talking about opening up the waiting room, starting to use that. Then, of course, on Sunday we didn't have our pre-meeting, ironically, on the day that didn't work. We went to GoToMeeting. So all the people who were able to get to GoToMeeting through all other kinds of issues now want Zoom back, even if they didn't like Zoom in the first place. So that was a good thing. So we're moving along on that. And the second thing I just want to say, in the PCUSA, Hudson River Presbytery has put out, now this is based upon New York City's opening guidelines of the 4 phases, but what to do in each one to think about on the local church in terms of whether it's how to continue online or what needs to happen in these phases. This is Governor Cuomo's 4 phases, and churches obviously are in 4, and that's way into the fall, if not Advent. But if you want that, I don't have access to that right now, but I know it might be on the Hudson River Presbytery site. I think
Okay.
George, their state clerk, wrote it, and I found it to be a very good article. And
If-
as we're starting, people are itching about things, it's good to help people see the big picture.
Right. If somebody wants to find that, some Presbyterian wants to find that and post it in the Facebook group. And again, if you're looking for the Facebook group, just look for Zoom Faith, and it should pop up for you. And then it looks like Susan's offering in the chat room that a Wisconsin Council of Churches has also done something. So maybe Susan, you could post that in the Facebook group as well. It's in the chat as well. But Susan, if you want to talk about that a little more, you're up.
Yeah, I've seen the Wisconsin Council of Churches get a lot of press. A lot of people are referring to them. If y'all don't know them, you would love them. They are policy wonks and church geeks, and they do they do the vetting of resources for us, which simplifies the process. Just in the last few days, I've put together a team that's going to be taking best practices and recommendations from the CDC and resources like the Wisconsin Council and maybe the PCUSA page, whatever, and then tailoring them to our church. And we don't have a lot of medical folks either, but one of the team members works for emergency management for the state of Illinois. She's
Uh-oh.
in Foreign Service, U.S. Foreign Service. It's like open and closed embassies and investigating airline crashes, and is phenomenal about protocol and getting our steps in place. And so that team is going to be making recommendations to our session. And so when we get that together, if anybody is interested in an Illinois-based process, because of course we're regional, right? And where the virus is in different places is different. So if you need a Midwestern version, we're working on something. The other thing I was curious about yesterday, and I didn't know that there were problems going on other places. We had problems with our 9 o'clock class, and we had problems when I tried to launch worship at 10, but both problems were through the Zoom app on my computer. So when it wouldn't open, when I couldn't admit people from the waiting room for worship, I closed down the app and I launched through the browser, and we didn't have any problems.
Okay. Well, I think, Andrew, did you post something somewhere that talked about there was an upgrade done like late Saturday? Did you post that somewhere?
They had a posting of a previously planned maintenance update that started at around, I don't know what time zone it was, but it said it was like 2,300 hours whatever time zone. It wasn't Pacific time. It was a time zone that I still haven't looked up the acronym to know where that is in the world, but it was overnight. It was 3 to 5 hours of maintenance that ended around 3 a.m. And I don't know. I'm just totally speculating, but couldn't help but notice that.
I laughed out loud when I said Andrew went and looked for like what time there might have been.
Hey, you know, the information's available.
I'm telling you,
I know.
I need you on our staff.
I was just curious that the app didn't work, but the browser window did.
Yeah.
And I didn't know if anyone else had that experience or not. So I didn't realize everyone was having the crisis they were until after we were done with worship and fellowship, because class didn't work, initial launch of worship didn't work, but the browser window did.
Yep. Adaptability right there. It's just adaptability and low anxiety. Or at least
Well, it helps if you don't know there's a crisis going on.
That is true too. All right. Thank you. Thank you, as always. All right. Any other questions or thoughts, folks? There's looks like there's a lot of great stuff in the chat room of links and things that are going on. I would say I'll make sure all those get to the Facebook page, but that's not going to happen, so I'm not going to promise that. So would encourage you all, if you've been sharing links, either somebody go and share those in the page. Though, if you could wait until tomorrow, I'm gonna, if not earlier today, look for when I post this recording, and then we can post all those links in there, because that way it all kind of stays in one stream. So it doesn't get too crazy over there on the Facebook page. All right. Yes, I will save the chat if folks want to take a look at that too, and that'll be there. But that's about as much as I'm going to promise. All right. Other question, Nancy. I don't know if we've heard from you before, have we?
No, this is my first time here, so thanks for having me.
Why has nobody said long-time listener, first-time caller? That's really what I'm looking for at some point. But welcome, Nancy. Where are you from? And go ahead and share what you want to share.
So I'm from Houston, Texas, PC USA, Sun Barbara Trinity, and we're a small congregation that meets in a large sanctuary. So the ability to meet again in person is great. We were able to meet for the first time yesterday. The church was. I was filling the pulpit at a sister church in Galveston. And via Zoom, that turned into Facebook Live. And that was okay. But my question is anyone thinking about how to incorporate Zoom into the actual worship service in the sanctuary? We have a lot of people who aren't able to get online. And we have a lot of people who are, but aren't ready to go back to service in person.
Yeah, so I think a lot of us are beginning to think about that. I'm actually doing a workshop with E-Formation with Sarah Stone Cipher Boylan, who is at Virginia Theological Seminary, called the Hybrid Church. And I'm starting to put that stuff together now, but there's lots of conversations that are happening about how not to just a live stream, and when I say just live stream, not that that's any less than, but how do we bring as much of the platform of Zoom into the space so that there still feels like we can have, now, I don't know if we'll be able to get to 50-50, but we can get close to creating some kind of reminder for the people who are in the space, that there are people outside the space. A couple of the things that we're thinking about, again, we are probably not going back until 2021 is my guess. But I have teased out that I would be open to being in the sanctuary with 3-5 other people doing something to get people used to seeing things. So the first thing I'm doing is I'm setting up the pulpit as, so we're not going to put cameras far back. We're going to actually, I'm going to have them close up so that there's a visual reminder that I'm not just going to be talking to the 20 people out here, but there's a whole screen of people right here. So it'll kind of look like a DJ station. That's really what I'm going for, is to have two laptops here and be able to speak to both here and here. So some of it is going to be visual. And then the great thing that we'll be able to add in is the sound quality is going to be so much better for music. That's the piece that and so our music will plug right into into our system. And so that's the piece that we're gonna do. So one of the things that we're thinking about is that I'm gonna push folks on, if they really want to make it kind of this hybrid space, is to do as much as possible to remind the people that are there that there are others and probably more who are not there. Because I think our momentum and gravitational pull to feel like church can only happen in the sanctuary and in our particular sanctuary, that's going to be really strong. And even for those of us that are leading worship, our focus on the live, physical, corporal beings that are right in front of us, we need to be reminded that there's this group here, and even if it's like I have it set to 42 people or whatever it is, that there's still folks not here. So that's one thing, is what are the visual reminders? That's one of the things I'm going to begin to think about. And then it's going to be making sure you have 2 or 3 other tech people always present, so that you're not, it's hard enough to DJ just you, if that's what you're doing now, but then you add in actual people and having to see a piano and all that, that to really have a trained second and third person on site with you who can, so all you're having to do is just preach, lead, whatever you're doing, that kind of thing. So those are 2 pieces. I don't think one person's going to be able to do this hybrid thing all on their own. There's just so much to it that most of us do not have that capacity. And to have visual cues for the people that are in-house, that there are more people not in that space. So those are the 2 things that I'm thinking about as kind of lead those conversations forward. So
Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Susanna, jump back in if you want. Go for it.
Thanks. I just want to say, like, I think I'm enshrining some of the live worship in our bulletin will help us make that transition to a hybrid space. So, like, I mean, this might be a little controversial for some reasons that I'd never have understood, but like, we've tweaked the liturgy a little bit to include those things. So, like, in prayers of the people, you know, it's like all these things that we lift up in our hearts or aloud or in the chat, like, you know, just those little things make such a difference, and it gives the cue out for people to online to do those things. But we acknowledge now, like, we've changed our bulletin so that we're acknowledging the onlineness of worship in our bulletin, and I think just keeping it that way when we go over into a hybrid space will then remind people, because now they will have actually been in that situation, will remind people that we do have people that are watching from home. And we're going to need that sooner than later, because while there are a lot of people who want to go back, there are also a lot of people who are not going to risk themselves, but at the same time don't want to, like, you know, don't want to miss being with other people. Yeah. So I think just enshrining it in the bulletin has made a huge amount, and that also includes, like, we do a shout out to kids. So we find out what kids are with us, worshiping with us today, and then we do a shout out to them. Shout outs have been really helpful. Me messaging the pastor saying, this person is with us, this is the prayer request, this is something that's on their hearts today, and then the pastor shouting it out, like, continuing that process, I think will help with the hybrid. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Yep. Great. Thank you. Yeah, and I think there's going to be lots of different ways. I do want to address, somebody lifted up in the thing about singing. So I'm assuming on Wednesday when we make our final decision, like most of our folks, if you've seen the videos, I mentioned them last week. I didn't post them in the Facebook group. If somebody wants to find them, that talked about, we are probably years out from public group singing of any kind. The Stanford webinar that was done about 2 weeks ago is really sobering. So if you want, you can find that, and I'll try to share it. But the other thing is that around the singing piece, and so what we're thinking about, we have a sanctuary that seats 225. So we're going to actually be able to give a singer and our music person huge amount of distance. And I told Elliot, who's our singer, I'm like, and you will be facing probably out the door with the microphone in front of you, but we're going to be able to, but our sound will be better. The other thing I think, Suzanne, is a great idea, is again, that lens of keeping the people who are not in person or who you don't know physically, keeping that lens always in the forefront is a great idea. So as you are shifting back, just remind yourself that draw back into the in-person only, you know, you can make some choices about that. I would say that some churches may decide we just can't do this online thing anymore. We're just going to go back to meeting in person. But making the decision to do it at least is better than just kind of easing into it and just say, we know we love having these people visit, but we can't do this for 2 years. Like, we just can't do this. I think that's a perfectly fine decision as long as it's made well. What I would hate is for churches to shift back and they'll go, oh, that's right, we had all these people we used to connect with. Why don't we see them anymore? And it was like, well, because we didn't focus on them. So that would be my only encouragement, is to, if you really want to do this, is have the community, have them make that decision, because we can't sustain this for years in most of what we're doing. And then to keep the lens, physical, in your liturgy, whatever, focused on that larger community now you're trying to create. I think there's exciting times ahead of us if the community and we can see the church differently. And again, I think some of us have always had grand ideas about what the church is supposed to be, and now we have this opportunity to live it, and it may not be as easy as we kind of thought it would be. So it's good times for folks. All right, we are at 9:00. Thank you all so much for being here. We're going to meet again next week, and then that'll be our last weekly meeting. And then starting in June, we're going to go to every other week. So I will update. I wanted to wait until after this meeting. I'll update the Zoom registration so you'll know what Mondays those are going to be. Not that I don't love meeting with you every Monday, but this is not sustainable for me at 8:00 in the morning every Monday. So we'll meet twice a month moving on, and we'll just kind of keep doing that as long as we need to, because I do enjoy hanging out with you. I think it's a great time. Jeff said next Monday is Memorial Day. Is that true? Oh, good Lord. It's the 24th. I'm not doing anything. So I'll be here. Yeah, I'll be here. I mean, I'm not going anywhere. I don't. So unless you all have big plans, I'll be here. And if you want to come, join anyway. All right. So thank you all for being here. Again, I'll post this recording as soon as I can, and have a great rest of the week. See you all later.